Hi, my name is Carrie, and I put together a quick little PowerPoint just explaining how I learned some of the more popular labs associated with the Nclex. These are my own ways that I just help maintain them. So the values in here mostly are from the ReMar's Quickfacts 5-star edition. There are a couple that are slightly off of that, but most of them, that's my source for them. So I just put this together and hope you guys enjoy it. The first one I'm going to talk about tonight is white blood cells, and the way I remember this is a white BMW car that I found for an awesome price of $5,000 to $10,000. This one is red blood cells, and this one I remember it by simply thinking about we are playing basketball at the Red River Basketball Club. Both girls and boys teams are playing, so you'll need to have male and female. On the boys team, the shortest player is 4.5 feet and the tallest player is 6.2. On the girls team, the shortest player is 4 foot and the tallest player is 5.5. This next lab that I'm going to talk about is platelets, and the simplest, easiest way that I can think of platelets is just thinking about when you're planning a wedding or if you're going to a wedding. Most often than not, there are between 100 and 450 settings for plates that are needed at that wedding. So that's how I remember that. Just remember this has actually thousands, so platelets are 100,000 to 450,000. But I just use the between 100 and 450. The next lab is going to be the BUN, blood urea nitrogen, and the normal lab value for that is 8 to 25. And I just think of a hamburger bun when I'm talking about this. When you go to a restaurant like Denny's, Perkins, something along those lines, you're usually paying about $8 for a burger plate. If you go to something more elaborate, luxurious, like a steakhouse or a fancier restaurant, you're going to pay about $25 for that plate. And so that's how I remember bun urea. This next lab is creatinine or creatinine. The normal lab is 0.6 to 1.3. The way I think of this, as you can kind of see my little creature guy in the background, is think of a creature, one that's ugly, rude, one you don't really want to think about, and if someone asked you to rate it on a scale, you're of 1 to 10, you're probably not going to rate them very high, so you're going to probably maybe rate them at that like 0.6 to maybe 1.3, so you're definitely going to be under a 2 rating, and that's just how I do creatinine. This one is APTT. And the normal range for this is usually 30 to 45 seconds. Typically it's used for heparin. I remember this because I can turn the double T's into an H to help me remember that. And then I use the association of a piano teacher teaches about 30 to 45 students a week. Knowing this, you also need to know that blood thinners will make the value 1.5 to 2 times longer. And so I remember this as the little a is half a letter and the capital P is one whole letter. So together that equals 1.5 for the first number, and then there are 2 T's to give you that 2 times. PT and INR. I think of preteen. For 10 to 15, someone who doesn't have a driver's license yet, just to get that range for PT. INR is 1 to 2. What I do is I convert the I to a 1, and then I have 2 letters left over, the N and the R, for 1 to 2. Now this is most typically associated with your Coumadin and warfarin, and how I remember that is I take the PT and the R for pills taken regularly, because more often than not, those are oral medications. Chloride and sodium. Chloride is typically 90 to 105, and I use the concept of chlorine. And so if you can associate chlorine and chloride, when it's really hot out, most people want to swim, and usually that 90 to 105 degrees is that popular time to go swimming. Sodium, it's 135 to 145, and you can, there's a couple different ways, they're not the greatest, but I think of if you take one small salt rock, that can turn into 35 to 45 granules to give you that 135 to 145. Or if you can remember the pH balance is 7.35 to 7.45, and you can just remember to carry the 35 to the 45, that might also be helpful for some people. Potassium and magnesium. Potassium ranges 3.5 to 5.1. The most common fruit with potassium that almost everybody seems to know is bananas. And I just think of when you go to the store, you usually find them in bunches of 3, and there's always a smaller banana, so that's like your halfway mark, and then you can get a range up to 5. I have 6 kids alone, and finding 6 bananas on a bunch is actually a lot harder than you would think. Magnesium is 1.5 to 2.5. There's a couple of different ways I've heard this one done. Personally, I came up with magazines. And when you're waiting in a dental office or at a clinic and you'll grab a magazine, you're usually able to read 1.5 to 2.5 articles. I've heard people use the magnifying glass as an option too, where that can magnify things 1.5 to 2.5 times. So there's my idea for magnifying. Hemoglobin and hematocrit are the next labs we're going to talk about. And hemoglobin, that's your male and female values again. And I just remember this as the abbreviation is HGB, the G for girl and the B for boy. Personally, I have 4 boys, but I have 3 boys that are actually 14, 15, and 16 and a half. So I use the ages of my children for that one. I also have 2 girls that are 12, and there are 3 letters total in HGB. And if you add 12 plus 3, you get 15. So that gives me my 12 to 15. Hematocrit, the easiest, most simplest way to do this is taking your hemoglobin levels and timesing them each by 3. So that gives you really close, accurate range. So 14 times 3 is 42, 16.5 times 3 is 49.5. So you see that the male value is 41 to 51%, so it's extremely close to that. And if you look at the female range of 36 to 46, if you take the 12 times 3, it's 36, and the 15 times 3 is 45. So if you can remember your hemoglobin and just remember to times that by 3 for hematocrit, you're going to know pretty close to if it's a normal value. Carbon dioxide. The normal range for carbon dioxide is 22 to 32. And I use the 2 here in CO2 to remember that there are 2 spots, and both numbers end in 2. So you have blank 2 to blank 2. There are 2 letters in CO2 here, and that's how I get my first number. So I have CO, which is 2, and a 2 at the end for 22. Then if you look at the words carbon dioxide and CO2, those are 3 total, and that's going to be the first number of your second. Glucose. Glucose normally ranges 70 to 110, and I remember this as glucose has 7 letters and an O to give me that first number of 70. Then to get the second number, I think about the fact that 1 cup of sugar takes about 10 minutes to melt down and liquefy to give me that 110 on the other side. Liver enzymes. We're going to do AST, our aspartate aminotransferase, which is 10 to 40 normal range. And if you notice, I have these numbers behind each of the words: liver, enzymes, AST, aspartate, and aminotransferase. So the first thing you're going to look at is if you take one word, aspartate, it has 9 letters. So if you add the 9 letters plus the 1 for the word, it equals 10 for your first number in that value. Now, the other thing is if you add all the letters from liver enzymes, AST, aspartate, aminotransferase, that equals 40. So that will give you your 10 to 40 range. Continuing with liver enzymes, ALT, the alanine aminotransferase, which is range of 5 to 35. If you take the alphabet letters L to S from the ALT and the AST, you get the letters M, N, O, P, Q, R. And if you remember to subtract the M, you then get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you are going to subtract the total number of 5 from your AST. So you get 10 minus 5 is 5, and 40 minus 5 is 35. Urine-specific gravity. The normal range is 1.016 to 1.022. And I just immediately think of the fact that there are 3 words, urine-specific gravity. And that's going to let me know that there are 3 numbers to the right of the decimal. When I look at how to continue going on with to remember, I think of united we stand in God. Personally, for at least this particular lab, I just go with the belief that there's one God, and the 1 goes before the decimal places. So you have 1 point dash 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 and 1 point dash dash dash. And then I think to not fail, which would be 0 because we don't want to fail, so then it would be 1.0 on both sides. Our course is in 16 to 22 months for the last 2 digits on both sides. So that would give us our 1.016 to 1.022.